everyone, and welcome back to Laurel Gardens. Very excited for this episode to bring you guys finally to the old side of the river here. And this would be the original part of the park that had opened near the turn of the century. And up until now in this series, the first 3 episodes, we have been over here on the newer side of the park, the side of the park that would have opened in the 70s. You can see that there are some things over there that you've not gotten to see yet, so there's a little sneak peek for you. But today we are going to be over here on the old side of the park, in particular in this area right here. So I'll give you a little bit of background of what's going on here before we start the updates. This right here, this structure in the middle, it's going to change quite a bit before the end of this episode, would have been the original carousel building. And when they built the new area of the park, they moved the carousel itself to the other side of the river, but they kept the carousel building for, we'll say, a purpose yet to be determined. I've not decided exactly what I want to do with that. But that is going to sort of be the centerpiece of this area that I'm building. Along with that, we've got what is going to be the oldest coaster in the park, easily. This is going to be a side friction roller coaster that is basically a recreation of Leap the Dips at Lakemont Park. And so you can see here, I've sort of got a station started with a little bit of styling, and we're going to end up calling the coaster Figure 8 as a nod to the Figure 8 coaster at Westview Park, although I'm sure that there were many other coasters called Figure 8 as well. And then sort of creating a border to this area over here is going to be one of the stations for the chairlift that's going to cross over the river and head towards the newer area of the park. Kind of moving this way here, got some other interesting pieces. We've got a whip that I've been working on, and that definitely needs to be worked into the area, obviously. And then we've got a tumble bug over here, which Silent Member was nice enough to create for me as part of a trade where I had worked on his carousel. And this is actually a mix of TMTK items and in-game pieces. So some of that is custom made. I think the track is custom made there and then created as a TMTK item. So we're not going to do a whole lot over in this area quite yet. Our episode is going to focus right now on this area here. You can see that there are some other interesting things connected that it will be part of another episode at some point down the road here. But let's go ahead and dive into our first update and see what's going on with this area. We've got a couple things to look at here for our first update. The first thing we're going to take a look at is our station here for our Figure 8 coaster. Not 100% finished yet, but certainly farther along than it was in our first part of the video. We can see that we've got a nice roof line going here. Some nice detail there. That is all custom using hydro beams. I couldn't quite find a fence that worked for me, and I really wanted to make sure that it was precise. I've also used hydro beams for all of this detail work around here to get these nice little curved parts. Just gives that extra little touch, that detail that you can't get with in-game pieces. We've got a really nice arch over the front here. And this is inspired by the Figure 8 coaster at Westview Park. Like I said, the station is also inspired by that coaster with a little bit of unique touch on my own, mostly to accommodate the size of the Planko station. It made things a little bit difficult. I'm trying to figure out how to make these paths work. It looks realistic. And on the underside here, some detail work on the roof. There's a nice pitched roof on the inside there. Really opens up that part of the station. Moving down the path, This is actually a ride skin that I've had sitting around for quite a while. Probably for 2 or 3 iterations of what is now Laurel Gardens. This would be a caterpillar ride, sort of like an older version of the Music Express, where the canopy actually goes up and over the cars. They used to have one of these at Idlewild, and sadly I think it has been removed recently, but it was one of my favorite rides when I was young. If we keep heading down along the path here, you'll notice that as we go along here, the terrain starts to dip. It dips once here, and then it dips a little further down here to this next building, which is going to serve a couple of different purposes. So we're going to have a couple of restrooms here on the side of the building. We've got areas for game stalls. We've got one here. And we've got one over here. And eventually, I'm going to put something else in these. I might keep one as the rollerball game, but I think the other one I'm going to try and make into a fish pond or ducky pond or some form of that old style game. That's definitely going to be a lengthy work in progress for me, as that's not my forte. And then underneath of this covered area between those two, I'm going to have a counter service restaurant here. And then I'll probably put some seating underneath of this, and probably a little bit more along the back side there as I fill that in. And then to go along with this building in the same style, I have one more building over here that is also going to house a game, maybe something like a ring toss, where you could potentially use 3 or even 4 sides of that building. Something that's a little bit larger to fit inside of there. And you can see even here the height difference as you kind of work your way up towards that. The figure 8 coaster up there. We zoom out a little bit, start to get some perspective here. This is where the carousel is going to go, so I was just trying to map out a general idea of the paths that I wanted to come in and converge on that area. And I would like to work this small building into the works as well. This is going to be an old-fashioned soda stand, and so there's some detail that's going to have to go into the middle to convey that. It's obviously not going to be able to be functional, but I want to keep that as one of the many nods to the history and heritage of the park. And so we're going to work that in on this side, I think on this path right here when it eventually is created. We're taking a look right here at some of the path work finally going in and really fleshing out this area and how things are going to flow. You can see that all of these paths lead right into our central carousel building. I was originally concerned here as I was creating this that this was going to be too big, that things were a little bit too far away from the center, but as I started to fill it in, it turned out to be pretty perfect the way that it was. You can see how we fit that soda stand in here, old-fashioned soda pop stand, right in the middle of the path that curves around it and into that building. And the small carousel, I was just kind of playing around with some ideas. Maybe I'd put that in there and create a little backstory for it, but I think in the end that's not going to happen, so just kind of seeing how that fit in there. You can also see that I've added path work that heads up, and the entrance to the park is going to be off to the right here, and right here is Dance Land, which used to be an old dance pavilion, probably going to be some sort of events building or rentable space or something like that. And there's going to be formal gardens that fill in this whole area all the way down the middle as you stand here and you get a nice view. Whoops. You get a nice view all the way down and to the other side of the river in the newer area of the park with the new carousel building all the way down there in our little mini Main Street area. And the last thing I'll show off in this update here as part of our path work is the queue line for our figure 8 coaster, which is going to start here on the right side of the station, head up along the side of our lift hill, and then kind of pop back up and around to the front. Again, I had to make some concessions here because of how large the station piece is for this coaster, or for any coaster in Planet Coaster for that matter, but it ends up turning out pretty nice, you guys will see here as we keep working on that. So this is really starting to come together here in this update. We finally have some details that are actually polish and not just structure. We've got a nice planter here that is the logo of the park, the Laurel Gardens logo, with a nice fountain in the middle there. This is part of the formal gardens that are going to come down from Danceland up there on the hill. And we've got our soda pop stand here, old-fashioned soda fountain stand in the middle there, with a really nice scene here. 1922 being the year that the original carousel building was built. The original carousel was put in place there, and also our first proper look at the finished carousel building in the background, which we'll get closer to in a moment. I took inspiration for the hedge work here, as well as this little scene from Kennywood that also has a carousel horse statue near its carousel building. And then these hedges that are actually, I think, rose bushes. I kind of took pointers here from Mike Sheets, or N7, however you might know him. But I did delete a fair few of the pieces that he had used for similar hedges to try and make this a little bit piece light, since this park is starting to chug a little bit. I love how grown in this feels. I love that the trees feel very mature, and there's lots of shade. And you don't just get open, wide views of everything. You really kind of peek around the area here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the carousel building itself. We'll make our way down this path. It gently slopes its way down and into here. You can see now that this is one big open area on the inside. And even by the end of this episode, I've not really nailed down yet what this is going to be. I think there are a lot of different possibilities, some suggestions that people have made, but I've really not just landed on what exactly I want this to function as. I don't think that we'll ever see a ride inside of here. I think what's most likely is that this is going to become some sort of performance space, maybe with a central stage where you can have some performers. I've also thought about doing some sort of like fairground organ or calliope, something that I could build a little bit of history around, but not really sure exactly what that's going to be. Let me take a view here and get a chance to see up into the top. You can see that very top piece is actually functional. It's open. It would be a nice way to allow some warm air to escape on hot days. Keep it nice and cool inside of this structure. And then we've got some lighting that would work to keep this lit up, as there is no longer a carousel in here, and so you lose all of the lighting on that ride, and you would need to replace that with something. So we've got some decorative lights, and then we've got some area lights here, some floodlights that would help to keep this area nice and light on the inside. One of the things that I really liked about this structure, you can see the arched wood pieces that go up and over are actually fairly close to what they would have actually done. They'd have taken thinner strips of wood and bent them and pieced them together in order to create a thicker, sturdier beam. And the planks, the in-game planks, have actually done a nice job of recreating that for me. And it turned out to be pretty realistic. We zip across to the other side here. The path that runs adjacent to the train and the river. This is another little scene that I've created here. These were intended to be like laurel bushes to go along with the park name. I don't know how close I got them. I was told that laurel bushes are part of the rhododendron family, so I use the rhododendron bush, but I don't know. I'm not a plant expert. I think it looks nice. I don't know if it looks like what I had intended it for it to be, but I think nonetheless it turned out pretty good. And you can see over here, we've still got lots of open space to work with. So let's go on to the next update and see what happens with that. We're going to start our next update from the other side of our carousel building as we make our way up on the left side of this area. You can see that we've got a new structure going in here on the corner. This was the only spot where I felt like maybe it was just a little bit too open. It felt like it needed something else here to go along with the other buildings that were on the side. So what we're going to end up doing is putting in a gift shop on the corner here. It's going to specialize in some vintage gifts, older gifts, or just gifts that celebrate the older area of the park. And then beside that, as we work our way up the hill, we're going to put a nice ice cream stand in here. Something with a really, really classic feel to it. As we make our way along the path, again, we've got our game stalls here. You can see that we've put a ring fling or a ring toss in here. And my apologies, I don't remember who had created this, but it was not my own creation. So if I can figure that out, I'll throw that down in the description or in a comment. We've got two big planters that create the gateway to this main path that goes into the carousel building. It leads away from our food and game stands here. Two nice big crimson trees. And I've not decided yet, as seems to be the theme with many of my planters, exactly what's going to go in here. I'm thinking I'm going to have to get a wave of inspiration to do some of these planters throughout the park, or have somebody who has a little bit of understanding of plants to do that for me. As we make our way up the path a little bit further and towards our caterpillar ride on our figure 8, and see that this is starting to fill out over here, starting to feel grown in. And then probably the most finished piece of this update is our cotton candy stand, a little old-fashioned cart. Again, taking heavy inspiration from something at Kennywood, including the colors that are here. This is something I would imagine used to travel around the park, but more recently has become sort of a semi-permanent fixture in this area, as the park would have done some work to create this little corner here with pavers and some other landscaping work to make it fit in and give it some space so that guests can line up, get their cotton candy. It is something that, a spot for people to stop at on their way out of the park, as it's not too far from the entrance, which is off there in the distance, and just creates a nice little focal point in this corner where there's not a ton going on besides our carousel building off here on the left. We have made it to our final update, and this is a big one with lots to show off. As we start right here beside the lift hill of our figure 8 coaster. I've changed the color here to go along with the yellow of the station, and I've got railings going on along our queue line that now feels much more complete. On the right side of our station here, we've got the proper entryway into the queue. And we've got a sign that will eventually hopefully be some history about the ride itself, as it is the oldest coaster in the park. We've got some benches going on around the front. You can see how the queue works its way up around the front side here. The exit path, it looks great, I think, with the stairs getting wider towards the bottom there, flaring out towards the bottom. And on the left side, this is not actually functional in-game, but I think it looks really good, would be a ADA accessible ramp here. It goes up towards the exit side of the platform. I know this looks a little bit strange, as I've said before, kind of forced my hand because of how large the station platforms are in Planet Coaster. But to me, it kind of looks like something that they had retrofitted to work a little bit better in the modern day, with some additional safety features in the station, an ADA ramp on the side, and some things that just would not have been there or would not have been a concern when the coaster was built way back at the beginning of the 1900s. So that is more or less finished, and to a point where I'm pretty happy with it. Let's head this way, I think. You see our soda fountain, old-fashioned soda fountain there. Work our way towards the river. I've edged out all of these planters. This is probably what was taking me the longest time. It was very tedious and not super exciting, but it did come out really nicely with the hedge work and then the curbs and the mulch all the way around. And then we've got a nod here to the original park. This is what the park used to be called back before it was purchased in the 1970s and expanded across the river. It was Keystone Grove before it was Laurel Gardens. You can see the tagline there, Wild Rides by the Riverside. The date in which the park was first created in 1902. And then this would be in York, PA, which is one of the many areas that is home to the Laurel Mountains, or the Laurel Highlands. So a nice planter there. Just another little scene to go along with our carousel horse on the other side. I'm really, really happy with how that turned out. We keep making our way across here. We've got our laurel bushes, our wild laurel around our stone fountain here. And then a huge, huge update here, this corner building, where I stole a little bit of my own work. This is made from the carousel building I had created for the Bro Nation mini build challenge. It was towards the beginning of quarantine. And so I picked off the topper here and taken some of the stuff that was along the bottom of the carousel and outfitted it into a corner building rather than a carousel building. There is a little bit of work that still needs to be done to polish up around the top here and make this work exactly the way that I want it, because I do want this to look good whenever you zoom out, and right now it's kind of messy inside of there. But I did want to be able to actually see through it and have those windows at the top function, even though these ones along the bottom do not. So that is our vintage gifts shop right there, with some nice seating out front and a planter that, as per the theme of the rest of the park here, needs to be filled in that isn't currently. I put a couple of trees along this little midway here just to make it feel a little bit cozier. I was feeling that the path was maybe just a little bit wide, and it kind of felt open for what it was, for being such an old part of the park. So I wanted something in there to make it feel a little bit cozier, and I think that does the trick. We got another planter here that helps to ease that transition up to the higher level here. it doesn't make that wall quite so awkward anymore. You've got your windows that are a little bit higher off the ground than these windows that are up in the front. As we work our way up and around here, we've got the creamery, which is a soft serve ice cream shop. That would be, just like everything else in this area, fairly old. To the older part of the park. We've got a little tagline up here supporting local dairy farms. There are lots of dairy farms in Pennsylvania that could service this creamery. And then spots to put menu items. They're probably going to require either some fake text. Some people do like, just like little lines to show menu items. Or I can maybe get a TMTK menu of some kind to put in there. We've got some railings out front here that would probably have been installed much later in this stall's life as the park grew and required a little bit of crowd control in the area. You can see you enter here and then you can either go left or you can go right, and then you would exit out either side there. Really, really happy with how this turned out. I like that it's not exactly the same architecture as this gift shop building on the right side, but it still feels like it's in the correct era. Definitely old. Got some really neat details along the top here. And trying to get some more buildings that have flat roofs on them, because not every building has a pitched roof. Especially in amusement parks where, if you can't see it, you don't necessarily want to spend money on it. So building a flat roof means that you've got no roof to worry about. It doesn't need to look pretty. It just has to be functional. So making our way around the left side of this, we've got some shrubbery here to hide our wall. And then something that I'm not 100% sold on. Just didn't quite turn out exactly how I had envisioned in my head. I wanted to do a nice big pergola here. Regardless of what ends up being here, I wanted something to act as shade and cover for these seats so that people would come around the back, sit here, and eat their ice cream. You get a nice view out there of the river, the bridge, and then some shaded views here of the carousel building, and just a spot to kind of people watch, but also get away from the crowds and things that are in the park here. But the pergola, I'm not sold on. You guys can tell me down in the comments what you think, or if you think maybe this would look better with just some umbrellas over top of the picnic tables. And yet another planter that would need to be filled in here. You guys, I'm sure, have gotten the hint now that planting is not my strong suit. I really like how this path turned out. It's one of the few times where the one of the path textures that is in-game worked out really nicely, and then I just used some pieces here to create the border along the side. And it looks like it fits in really well. It definitely has a tone shift from the asphalt into this area. It just gives a little bit of separation visually as you walk in through there. And then of course we have finished off all of the scenery that is bordering our carousel building here as we work our way around. I've filled all of this in. Nothing too complicated here. You notice that there's not a lot of color. There's a lot of green, but there's a lot of area in here to landscape. So they try to keep it cheap while still keeping it look really nice. And this just has a really classic feel, in my opinion. It gives it that vintage, laid-back sort of feel. And then what I'm really excited for is the eventual view that you're going to get as you come up this path, and you've got the arcade building that's going to be front and center right in the middle of that. Totally an accident that that landed right where it did, but I'm happy that it did end up that way. And I'll give you guys a sneak peek of maybe what's to come in some future episodes. We got this whole area that would be a later edition, probably in the 40s. And so you can see some architecture there, very retro, a little bit of Googie inspiration, some Art Deco and things like that. So I'm excited to get into that area and work our way back up towards the entrance of the park, which is just, you can see it peeking up above that building in the distance there. But that is it. That is our first big area on the old side of the park that we've gotten a chance to build up a little bit. And it actually takes up a nice chunk of the park over here, a nice little corner. Our old carousel building, our figure 8 roller coaster, Caterpillar ride, some games and food, our ice cream stand, our vintage gift shop on the corner there, and lots of really great scenery around. Let's wrap this up with a POV of our figure 8 coaster and some cinematic shots, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Go ahead and let me know what you thought about our episode here and the older part of the park, and let me know what you want to see in some of the other areas of the park moving forward. Thanks for joining me. Bye.